thanks everyone for being here. If I do a quick scan of the room, it looks like this is we got the Republicans over here, mostly the Democrats over here. It's kind of funny how that happens. I'm also not sure why Republicans came to this panel, because it's all of you guys, just really based on the folks I see in the room who are actually innovating online. So we don't need to tell you. But I am going to talk about a few trends that we're seeing in online politics generally and specifically on the right. I'll go through a few slides. Definitely don't want this to be too slide heavy because, in the nature of what we all talk about, much rather this be a dialogue than a monologue, me talking at you as opposed to talking with you. I think, we've gotten... kind of briefly, these are just sort of a sample of a bunch of headlines that we saw in 2007 and 2008. We probably would have seen them in 2006 and 2005 if the press had been covering online politics as heavily as they did in 07 and 8. But these really indicate is that there was at least a narrative out there that Republicans were behind online, that they didn't understand the internet, they weren't embracing it, they weren't being open. They were Luddites. We had our presidential nominee was John McCain, and he said he didn't even know how to use a computer, that his wife helped him out. It certainly didn't help that image. There were some of us who had been really pushing the ball forward, trying to convince Republicans that you needed to come into the 21st century, you need to integrate new media and technology into everything that you do. It's changing. And there were certainly some bright spots. But for the most part, the press narrative was Democrats get it, Republicans don't. And these are the headlines that we saw. Then we get to no 9, no 10, and it dramatically shifted. And I think even for those on the right who have been shouting this from the rooftops since 2004, 2005, we were pretty shocked at how quickly this turned around. I was part of an organization that launched right before the RNC chairman's race to make sure that the new Republican National Committee, the new Republican Party, understood how the world had changed and that they would change their infrastructure too. It was called Rebuild the Party. We said you need to have specific, a commitment to specific principles for moving the party forward. Largely, a lot of people paid attention. I think hopefully more people started to get that that's where we were going, and they grabbed onto that message and they ran with it. Certainly, the pool of people in the party who eyes don't glaze over when you start to talk about how the world has changed has grown. I'd say it's grown from maybe a handful to the amount that can fit in this room. But it's not enough. But it did lead to the point where very smart people, some in this room who work at political committees, who work for organizations, who are part of the Tea Party, who are consultants, led to the point where these are the headlines that we started to see. Congressional Republicans own YouTube, Republicans have an edge in new media, Republicans dominate Twitter, accounts double the Democrats. And this is certainly, if you're a Republican, this is a reason to kind of pat yourselves on the back and say, we didn't remain in the wilderness forever, we're not remaining in the darkness, we get what's happening, we're moving forward, let's give ourselves a pat on the back. And there are people who deserve that pat on the back. And these are the types of initiatives that we've started to see. And these take hard work, and they are a step in the right direction. We've seen the GOP, not just campaigns, but those that are in government, House Republicans, particularly somewhat, senators on the right as well, embracing new media, embracing social media, embracing the new paradigm. We had a new media challenge coming out of the House. We have, more money going into new media from a committee than we've ever seen before. We have House leadership with YouTube accounts where they're constantly updating constituents on what they're doing via video, without it being 100% scripted, without, everything having to be polished and shined. And we have candidates who are doing things like Facebook town halls, allowing open comments on social media. All of this seems really basic and mundane to all of us in this room. But if we look at where we were 2 years ago, it actually is quite advanced. We were at a point in 2004, 2005, particularly on the right, but somewhat on the left, where our institutions weren't even willing to have comments, open comments on blogs and on social media. This is a step forward. It certainly is. We've even gotten to the point with the examples that I just gave, as good as they are and as promising as they are, and I don't want to criticize them because I think there's definitely some good things, you know, the first steps, we're still a point, even if you're using Twitter, even if you're using Facebook, where we're talking at people. We're not having conversations, not having dialogue. It's still very controlled and very scripted. But Republicans get it. There was a lot of smart people, a lot of them on this panel, who were convincing them that you can't just be checking a box and saying we use Twitter, we use Facebook, we have a website that allows comments. But actually to the point where we have individuals contribute to the policy that's made by the right and by conservatives. I spend most of my time actually working on political campaigns. And when I thought about this panel, I said, you know, I could go through the campaigns that I've worked on over the last year and a half, the McDonald for Governor campaign, i.e. effort, you know, in the New Jersey governor's race. We provided fundraising for Scott Brown's race. I thought I can go through the nuts and bolts and the interesting tactics. But is that the conversation that I really want to have? Everyone in this room is at the point where you know what those nuts and bolts and tactics are. The conversation that I want to have is that how do we take this to the next level? So the Twitter, you know, getting on Twitter and getting on Facebook is one step. The next step is these efforts that are pointed out here that Republicans have tried. It's an effort by the House Republican whip Eric Cantor called UCut, where it asks people to vote on what they specifically want cut from government spending, from the House budget. And is having people vote, and hopefully those ideas are taken and actually put into effect. The consequence is played out. You have America Speaking Out, which was a big effort. You know, there was some criticism in the media, and certainly from the left, and somewhat from the right, to say we don't need another website like this that's kind of a fake community site, that's a site that's just trying to get more people to sign up, give their email address, as opposed to solving problems. But when before have we had our leaders, our Republican leaders, actually come behind a project that let so many people give their input, and without, you know, there's some filters, but without as many filters as we've seen in the past. I know, you know, Mike Turk's in this room. We worked together at the RNC in 2005, and we were constantly banging our heads against the wall. I like to say that and Katie Harbath next to Mike. Sorry, I didn't see you there. I like to say there's still an indent in the wall at the RNC from me banging my head against it over and over. And I know that they can agree with me, and that's because the second that anybody wrote something on a wall that, not even that was critical of our message, and at the time it was Social Security reform, but didn't use the correct terminology, said Social Security privatization instead of Social Security reform. Personal accounts. Yeah. So as soon as somebody used the wrong terminology and said this is a failed project, you know, we can't do this, we have to shut it down. You know, we had a video program that, you know, wasn't CNN quality, and it was shut down, even though it was the most popular video program, well, it was really the only video program, but it was the most popular initiative the Republican National Committee had ever done. It got shut down because it wasn't CNN quality. I mean, this is where we were in 2005, and if we fast forward to 2010, we certainly have progressed, and I think that's a reason to be happy. But, you know, I understand the skepticism as well. The next step, what we would need to see, is whether these are just gimmicks. You know, can we prove the people wrong that these aren't just gimmicks? They're not just ways to build an email list, as Clay Johnson talked about this morning, and they're not just ways to, you know, show off how big our metrics are, but they're actually ways to listen to people, take their ideas, take their voice, and actually include it in what we're offering as policy. You know, I've been on some campaigns where this actually works quite well, even if they're not the most social media savvy campaigns. Taking the comments that are made about policy on their sites and referring to them in speeches that it had an actual impact on the way that a candidate is thinking about policy in an authentic way goes a very long way, even if you are not the most savvy candidate on Twitter and Facebook. So